Hello again, Bronies and Pegasisters. It's me, it's Clayton. And the Season 6 premiere has finally happened. The Crystalling, written by Josh Haber, who has also become the story editor of this season. So this Season 6 premiere gave us a lot of great comedy and, in my opinion, one of the better Crystal Empire stories. Unfortunately, it does take a little bit of time for the story to get pretty interesting, as, in my opinion, Part 1 has a lot of exposition, and ultimately there's not a lot going on, which makes it seem like it's more just a build-up for Part 2, which is a problem I have with a lot of season opener two-parters. However, the comedy is still excellent, provided by, of course, Pinkie Pie, and even the new baby Princess Flurryheart. But before we get to the nitty-gritty of the episode, let's get to the story. The story here is that Starlight Glimmer has to accomplish her first friendship lesson by going to meet up with her friend Sunburst, who you may remember from the Season 5 finale, who turns out Sunburst is actually living in the Crystal Empire, where the main six also has to deal with the Crystalling, a special ceremony where the Crystal Empire celebrates the birth of a newborn baby. Only problem, this newborn baby, Princess Flurryheart, happens to be an alicorn. So, and unfortunately, the baby's magic proves to be so uncontrollable that she inadvertently destroys the Crystal Heart, which means that the entire Crystal Empire could be frozen solid. So the main six has to find a way to repair the Crystal Heart, while Starlight Glimmer tries to rekindle with a friend that she, left after the traumatic event at the end of Season 5 that we saw. Let's get to the parts that I liked. I liked the fact that Starlight Glimmer finally got some character development. That the finale for Season 5 shows us that Starlight could develop a lot more as a character than we expected. And considering that it's not said whether or not she'll be part of the main cast throughout the majority of the season, but I hope she does, we could consider this team the main 7 rather than the main 6. Starlight Glimmer's development comes to the forefront when she meets up with Sunburst. And you'd expect Sunburst to be an important wizard, but turns out he's a lot more like a college dropout who had a lot of potential but sort of squandered it. Which is not to say that he's completely useless, because he's not, as you've probably seen if you've seen the episode. But overall, Sunburst doesn't get a lot of character development as I would have liked, because most of his interactions with Starlight Glimmer have him repeat the same things while talking, and their conversation is, of course, awkward in a very purposeful way. Luckily, the other story arc is actually pretty fun to watch. The baby Princess Flurryheart is not only adorable, but she also happens to provide some great comedy, and I love the fact that Princess Flurryheart happens to have a lot of spells up her sleeve that we haven't seen beforehand from baby foals. I mean, and also, since this problem was mainly since the main conflict of the episode was mainly brought on by Miss Princess Flurryheart, it makes for a season premiere that for once doesn't have to deal with a major villain who's really just there to fulfill the role of being a villain. It's more of just handling a natural disaster. That was exactly my problem with the Crystal Empire. My problem with the Crystal Empire was that King Sombra was so underdeveloped as a villain that he could have just been replaced with a natural disaster and he didn't have to be a character. Here, it actually does work out that way. As Celestia and Luna finally get off their royal heinies and actually happen to hold off the storm long enough for our main characters to figure out a solution to the problem. It makes this season premiere stand out more than Season 3's premiere. But like I said, the pacing throughout is a little bit slow, so I just had to be patient throughout. Personally, I think the exposition would have gone on a little better if there was a song put in, which is odd for me to say, considering sometimes the songs get in the way of the story. But here, I actually think a song would have helped out things more by making the exposition not as arduous. but there are no songs. Josh Haber, his writing style, it does go back to his season 4 style, which has a lot of setup and a lot of exposition before a big payoff. And even though the exposition isn't as arduous and isn't as boring as those episodes that he was involved in, such as Simple Ways, personally, I would have preferred a bit more stuff happening in part 1 to keep me interested. Luckily, the finale of this season premiere is pretty heartwarming, and seeing the actual crystalling ceremony is pretty fun to watch. Plus, the background ponies look more like convention guests or people at movie theaters than, people who camp out at movie theaters rather than Crystal Empire people. Ponies, I mean. And to be honest, that type of humor worked out for me. The message of the episode about reaching out to people when you need help with something is actually a pretty nice message, and it does work out with the Starlight and Sunburst storyline. I just wish that their conversations were not as awkward and not as drawn out as they were. Yeah, plus the storyline has a bit of filler in it, with both the awkward conversations and with Spike telling his stories about the Crystal Empire that we've already seen. So yeah, it's pretty mixed overall. While I like the finale, Flurry Heart, and most of the humor of this episode, I personally would have preferred less filler, more interesting things going on, and less awkward conversations that really slow down the pace. It's not a bad premiere, but I wouldn't consider it an amazing one. So I will give this episode a 6 out of 10. I'm interested to see what goes on after this episode, but so far, I'm just sort of disappointed. So tell me what you thought of the premiere. I'm Clayton Martin, and I'll see you next week.